Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Music Den. I'm your host Armando Venditti. Hoping you guys are having a fantastic day and that you're looking after yourselves and one another. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another segment of Attack of the Killer B-Sides. And joining me on this fantastic episode for another fantastic B-side of another fantastic album is Ken Cheshire and Jim Bricker. How's it going, guys?
Fantastic.
Good. Yep.
That's wonderful. Now,
What this week?
ladies and gentlemen, again, the idea of these sets of episodes that the idea for it was to come up with a list of albums that I felt had killer B-sides. Again, that's not to say that uh, the A-sides are inferior for, by any stretch of the imagination. I just wanted to have a little bit of fun with this exercise and come up with a list of albums that I felt that had all killer tracks from track one to track six, and in some cases, track eight. Um, and as luck would have it, Jim and Ken and also Bill Schuster had decided to come along with me for this ride. And the purpose of this episode is so Jim can discuss an album that he feels has a killer B-side. Jim,
Oh, okay. Is this going to devolve into a point counterpoint?
it may go on.
Okay. The album which I have brought forth to the panel to discuss as having a killer B-side is Billy Joel's, oh, we'll call it his fourth album, Turnstiles from 1976. I call it the fourth because I'm excluding Attila. So Cold Spring Harbor, Piano Man, Street Life Serenade, Turnstiles.
It, it,
Turnstiles was,
it,
yes.
sorry, it is his fourth. Sorry.
Well, thank you. Um, so we have discussed Turnstiles before on a prior episode of a series that we did of Close But No Cigar, which is albums that are almost perfect. In this case, there is a track on side A that I feel keeps Turnstiles from being perfect, but side B
Mhm.
pretty dang flawless. So let's sort of dig into it. Um, Side B starts off with a ballad, um, and it's a bit of a different sounding ballad right out of the gate. The track is called James, and it's distinctive because Billy is using Fender Rhodes on this, which doesn't use very often. Mostly it's just kind of straight piano. Might use a synth to kind of highlight things here and there. Of course, he would use Fender Rhodes most famously on Just the Way You Are, right, Ken?
Yes.
Yes. So, but
Yes.
this is a an earlier use of it. And James, to me, is this fantastic song of kind of reflecting on youthful exuberance, but kind of wondering where it's sort of gone to. You know, people have their dreams and aspirations of youth, and kind of what have you done with your life? Um, as the narrator of the song is reflecting back to this friend James to kind of say, hey, you were going to do this. My life went a different direction. Which of us is the happier? Um, I think it's a very uh, not only is it introspective, but it's also just very what's the word I'm looking for? The observations in it are very astute in kind of thinking about how other people make choices and what they do with them, and to really sort of say, geez, is this really what you wanted out of your life? Is this really the path that you wanted to end up going down? 3 minutes, 53 seconds. Just a wonderful way to sort of start side two in this sort of low key contemplative manner. And it's a great way to sort of set the pace for where side two is going. I think it's a fantastic, I think it's a fantastic start. And as we discuss more and more of the side, you'll hear why. Um, Gents,
I would agree. I would agree.
Yeah,
Um,
another great point of this song, not just the Fender Rhodes, but it's essentially just the Fender Rhodes and bass guitar. You
With
know,
the clarinet solo, or is that soprano
a little bit,
sax?
yeah. So it's very, very stripped back. It's very personal. Uh,
Hmm.
I'd like to point out that when this album was released, Billy Joel had just turned 27. And this album shows what,
Oh, I just think it's amazing that people who are
oh,
that young can produce something this, substantive.
I would
Certainly,
call
I
it,
wasn't
yeah,
doing
and
anything.
this album, yeah, and this album shows an amazing insight into
Yes.
life that most of us don't acquire until much later in life.
Hmm.
but the
And as we
fact,
see, and
yeah,
as we
sorry.
see on social media, a lot of people never acquire that wisdom. But
Um,
um, but yeah, I consider that same way with Jackson Brown in a lot of his earlier works too, you know.
Sure.
So it's just mind-boggling. This is a letter to, a childhood friend who chose a different path. The song is wistful, reflective,
yeah,
and in a way kind of subtly um critical, but yet
Sure.
understanding.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot packed into this song.
yeah, and just quickly, and the fact that someone again at the age of 27 could be so, I guess you'd say, analytical and reflective, like uh, on the past, and just you know, this is where my life has brought me up to this point, and basically, to me, he's looking ahead as to what the future could possibly bring for him and for James. He's wondering about James. So it is a good start for side two.
And we'll
Hmm.
be revisiting that theme on the rest of the songs too.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, it's a perfect segue, Mr. Cheshire. Thank you for setting the table so cleanly to track two, which is, Prelude slash Angry Young Man, which is it's not a whole different perspective on youth, but it's kind of looking at it from a bit of a different angle. So whereas the subject of James, is being questioned for his life choices and, what he decided to do with things, do what's good to you or you're not good for anybody, then you sort of move into Angry Young Man, which is all about someone who's just decided that everything needs to be railed against. This is the story of a person or the metaphor of a person who's just always going to grab their torch and their pitchfork and just speak loudly about whatever is going on. It's interesting that this was done during the very trailing edges of the Vietnam War. And, of course, before that was all the love and hippie stuff of the late 60s, early 70s. Um, we've seen a lot of culture that kind of reflects back to that, but they're not talking about, um, stop the war and, ban the bomb and things like that. It's much different things that people are sort of talking about now, but that youthful fire and stoking kind of still is in there. And it's just interesting the way Billy talks about it, much like James, where he's kind of as much as encouraging James and giving him a gentle poke. Angry Young Man is very, very similar. He's extolling the virtues. There's a place in the world for the angry young man, but also on the same side, he's fair and he's true and he's boring as hell. He'll go to the grave as an angry young man. There's no growth there, which is
Yeah,
quite the
there's no
conflict.
progression.
Yeah, right. There's, James is at least there's a deliberateness to the character of James where he's, trying to figure out the right way to go. Whereas, Angry Young Man is just in this spiral and never really goes anywhere in their life. The go to the grave is the angry young man. Um, so it's interesting that side two sort of kicks off with these different perspectives of youth and how people idealize something and whether they hang on to it or whether they're sort of reflecting and sort of moving on. And of course, the tempo and the timbres of the two songs are, couldn't be more diametrically opposite, from the tender Fender Rhodes of James to this just fiery, intro in Angry Young Man that was inspired by Wipeout. Billy Joel wanted to do a piano version of Wipeout, if my
Yeah,
memory kind of serves right.
yeah,
That's kind of the percussiveness that he was sort of going for,
yeah.
and serves very, very well on the song to kind of represent the fire and passion, however misguided it might be. I just think it's a great dynamic duo to start off any side of an album, whether it's an A side or a B.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Yeah, you can go on.
I can. I don't know. Ken added a whole ton of awesome color to James. I was hoping he would do the same with Angry Young Man.
Well, I mean, it starts off with that blistering prelude.
Prelude. Yeah,
It's just incredible. Um, this really does show off, as though do many of the songs on this album, show off his prowess at the keyboards. And even Angry Young Man starts off with a nice tempo, but it has a break where they pull the tempo back a bit.
Yep. Yep.
And fantastic synthesizer break in it.
Hmm.
For 76, it's not overdone. It's very simple. It just, and I really love the cynicism uh towards the self-righteous idealism in this.
Well said.
This is Billy Joel as a 27-year-old curmudgeon. And of course,
he's
this
he's
album,
questioning a lot. He's questioning a
yeah,
lot.
this album, I mean, this is right after he moved back to New York from living in Los Angeles and that whole West Coast scene. That's why there's so much of a New York vibe to this album, which of course he would expand upon a lot and be known as, you know, I mean, the album starts off with "Say Goodbye to Hollywood."
Yeah,
You know, it's pretty much, right on the nose. And he had a disillusionment with fame and all of that, and was developing a lot more self-confidence in his own personal artistic direction.
Hmm.
The fact that he fired
yeah.
the
We were.
original
It was.
producer and
I was going to mention
studio
that.
musicians and used his own live band, which
Yeah,
they didn't want him they didn't want him to use his band. And he said, "No, I have a fantastic band.
yeah,
Dang it, I'm going to use them."
yeah.
And
I'm going to chime
boy,
in on
did
that.
he. Yeah.
I'm going to chime in on
So,
that, ladies and gentlemen. The original production for this album started at Ranch Caribou in Colorado, which is the band Chicago studio, and the production duties were originally going to be handled by James William Guercio, I think is how you say it, Guercio, who was Chicago's producer at the time, and also featured session players Dee Murray on bass and Nigel Olsson on drums from Elton John's band.
Yeah.
But but Billy Joel was not happy with the results of these recordings, so he fired everybody and decided to take on production duties himself for this album, which to me shows a lot of confidence within yourself to say, you know what, I can do better than this, and I can do it myself, and I'm gonna do it myself. So
yep.
there's a lot of there's a lot of confidence on this album overall, but I don't want to take the spotlight away from Jim. You may
Well,
continue.
talking collaboratively and collectively about how great this is. So this isn't meant to be the Jim show.
Continue, my dear boy.
All right, I will continue then. Moving on to track three, which I didn't even kind of see it in this way. It all just sort of kind of came to me as we started talking about it. Is that this kind of hits? This is the completion of the trifecta about perspectives about youth. This whole song is about a look back. So it's kind of whereas James kind of starts with, plans that we had as youth and, how is those things going? Angry Young Man is about just being stuck in the mire of where you're at with your, anger and your opinions and whatnot.
Yeah.
Whereas I've Loved These Days is probably one of the greatest look back songs in rock and roll. It's got this astonishing melody and just maturity to how someone reflects back to the life that they've lived. Um, Oftentimes I tear up when I hear this song just because of it's not wistful, that's not the right word, just kind of the longing and the clarity and the succinctness that Billy has put things in the words. And again, he's married it to this beautiful, beautiful melody. And the refrain of, I've loved these days, just
I mean, the overall acceptance of his life and what he's experienced. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, we'll have to change our jaded ways. I'm just kind of stuck right now in trying to bring the things to mind without kind of breaking down a little bit. I don't know, I must be getting old. But there's
On
just
this channel, you can break down. Go ahead.
well, sure. But yeah, it's astonishing to me that these three songs together work so well in kind of looking at the at aging. And 27, obviously that's not old, but that's where you kind of begin in your life to say, hey, I am moving forward
Yes.
in things. And it's a time where people start to get maybe a bit more serious about what they want to do with their lives, family, children, all, what kind of life am I having? What kind of career am I having? All these things. You begin to think more about the future. Um, so I just am kind of taken by the maturity that Billy Joel is showing in the strength of just these three songs together. And Billy Joel, I don't think has a very strong track record of strong side Bs. Even his most successful albums, like The Stranger and 52nd Street, there's one or two songs that are kind of meh on them. But on Turnstiles, it's like every song on here is just a solid 10. Absolutely fantastic. I think this is his on a strong discography. This is there's no half a mile away on here like there is on 52nd Street. There's no get it right the first time like there is on The Stranger, which to me are like both of those are kind of swing and a miss songs, whereas all these on Turnstiles are just one grand slam after another.
Okay. Well, fair enough. Ken, do you have anything to
Yeah,
Ken
add?
looks like he wants to say something.
these this album and particularly these songs immediately came to mind recently reading about Billy Joel's diagnosed illness. I mean, this is something that a lot of other people, you know, in where he is now would have written. And he did
Yeah.
this at 27.
Mhm.
I mean, and on this song, you've got nostalgia mixed with regret, of the indulgence and decadence of the past. And it's ironically romantic, we're going wrong, but it's been grand, you know, with
Hmm.
some excellent horn work. and some nice strings in the background. It's
Great orchestrations. Yeah.
you know, it for me it is the tearjerker on this album,
Hmm.
for sure.
Hmm.
And
Which is saying something when you compare it to, New York State of
State of
Mind,
Mind.
which is it's also very strong in pulling the
Sure,
heartstrings. Yeah.
Yeah.
sure. And this is one of I remember this was the song um, when the album came out that it's like, ooh, I've got to learn how to play this on piano.
Hmm.
And so, it was one of my earlier, piano songs in high school. So,
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. All
If
right.
forced to, could you still plunk it out?
yeah, will I hear? No,
Okay.
I don't have a piano close by. So,
Fair excuse.
Okay. No, good reason. Good reason. All right. Continue, my good sir.
Well, we're going to continue and we're just going to land on the last tune. I mean, this is an album that's only got 8 songs on it.
Yeah.
And so, quick and economic. I think it's only like 36 minutes long or something. It's
something
not,
like
it's,
that. Yeah,
it's a pretty
Yeah.
tight
It's
record.
yeah,
yeah.
36.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the album closes with, Miami 2017, also known as Seen the Lights Go Out on Broadway, which I'm trying, it might be stretching the metaphor to have this be about, continue the kind of story about aging, but I guess thematically it kind of fits because once again, it's a great story song about someone really looking back, and before we all lived here in Florida. um, it's kind of Billy Joel's science fiction ode to, New York falling apart. In this case, in, very deliberate ways through, um, war, chaos, invasion. I'm not sure exactly what the conceit is in his mind, but clearly it's this fantasy of, people looking back from their, Florida little bungalows into, boy, didn't New York go to hell in a big hurry?
Think
Yes.
of the last scene in Planet of the Apes.
There you go. Yep.
There you
Fair
go.
enough.
Yeah.
That'll do it. That's a
Okay.
great visual metaphor right
Although I
there.
don't want to hear Charlton Heston try to sing it, but there you go.
No, definitely not. Him and Clint Eastwood belong on that same pedestal. Please be quiet.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Okay.
but it's, Miami 2017 is a great story song. And again, there's some I don't know if it's prominent synth, but the synth that's in there is used, very well and very effectively. Um, and just the way the story unfolds through, the intro and then the end, which are, kind of setting the stage sonically, and then the 3 or 4 verses where it just kind of tells the story of just how everything sort of fell apart. I'm just trying to think of the lyric, we sent a carrier out from Norfolk and picked the Yankees up for free. I just love that line, because I think it's just very colorful and it kind of shows a New York pride,
Hmm.
that kind of goes throughout, the whole of this album, like you were saying, Ken. It's his Return to New York album.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the first time I heard this song, and I've loved these days, was from the Songs from the Attic album, which was, released after Glass Houses. And this is where Billy kind of said, "Hey, you all think I started with Stranger. Not true. Here's a bunch of these older songs that I feel need a little more love." And in fact,
Absolutely.
half of Turnstiles is on this
Mhm.
album because it's got Say Goodbye to Hollywood, um, Miami 2017, I've Loved These Days, Summer Highland Falls. Um, so yeah, this is a very, it's an album that I think is very close to Billy Joel's heart, or it was. at one time, and these songs are just so strong.
Yeah.
Again, it's when so The Stranger was kind of everywhere and very ubiquitous in 1977,
Yeah.
much like Fleetwood Mac Rumors, much like Frampton Comes Alive, Hotel California. It was just something, congratulations, you've hit puberty, have The
It was
Stranger.
it was in the musical DNA. I was gonna say Asia, Steely
Yes,
Dan.
Asia, definitely.
Had to say
Um,
Steely Dan.
well, come on now.
No, I'm not, Jim, I'm not saying it in a bad way. I'm just
I
saying
know.
those albums, Asia, Rumors, etc., etc. Songs in the Key of Life. I mean, you can come up with a list of albums
Oh
that
yeah.
in that year that were the touchstone
Yep.
for certain people.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly. And as good as The Stranger is,
I've got a
I just
question
happen
about
to
that.
think that Turnstiles just surpasses it.
Okay, I've got a question for you. The songs on this side, along with the rest of the album, but concentrating on the Attack of the Killer B sides, the
Hmm.
songs on side B, going backwards through his catalog, would you say that this was Billy Joel at his zenith in terms of being a singer-songwriter, looked at as a singer-songwriter? Because we all know that The Stranger and moving forward, he hit the mainstream in terms of the hits.
Hmm.
Or would you say that this side, along with the rest of the album and the albums prior, was saw Billy Joel as a singer-songwriter per se? That's how he was known prior to The Stranger coming out. Because The
Well,
Stranger took him to a whole other level.
yeah, a whole nother stratosphere. And,
Yeah.
one could argue that some of those songs are more creative, they're better, they're more heartfelt. Not to me. I mean, The Stranger is an outstanding album, and Scenes from an Italian Restaurant. I'll stop anytime that 8-minute jam starts and just listen to the whole thing and just be absolutely delighted. Um, I just happen to think that Turnstiles is a lot more honest, effective, kind of tight, and I think it's just sort of this departure point, where he's not trying to manufacture the hits that Columbia wanted him to. It's certainly a quantum leap from Street Side Serenade. Um, I don't know if this is his apex, just because there's stuff about The Stranger and 52nd Street both that are very strong. But for me, Turnstiles is my favorite album just because of the heartfelt feeling that goes into all these songs,
Okay,
with the exception of that one on side A.
maybe I didn't word it properly, but for me, there's a definite difference where you see, I look at Turnstiles and albums previous as Billy Joel, the singer-songwriter,
Hmm.
as opposed to The Stranger, 52nd Street, and moving on as more of Billy Joel, the hit maker. Do you know what I mean?
Well, my counter to that, my good man, is that Stranger is probably an evolution in his singer-songwriterness. It's just that he struck so many strong chords that it became a monster. It sort of
Okay,
became a
okay,
hit.
okay.
52nd Street, maybe that's more of, all right, now I got to continue to make hits, even
Now,
though I
now I
want
got it.
these
Now I
things to
got to
have,
feed the
yeah,
machine. Yeah, okay. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Can I
But
say
having said all that, it's great that
Sorry, go
sorry,
ahead.
Ken, that for his subsequent albums, from The Stranger, 52nd Street, he tried to have a Steely Dan feel. The Glass Houses, he tried to have more of a punk feel.
New
Nylon
wave.
Curtain, he tried to have more of John Lennon. I mean, I love that for each of those albums that happened after The Stranger, he tried to
Yeah,
go after a distinctive kind of feel
yeah.
and have that be, what sort of permeates throughout the whole record.
Yeah, I just want to
Sorry.
add. I just want to add too, and then Ken can chime in, and I'll shut up. Scenes from an Italian restaurant. You can hear uh, piano snippets of that track in the Netflix series movie Nonnas, because of the story of the movie. They inserted piano interpolations, let's say, of scenes from an Italian restaurant in that movie. So you do get that kind of New York feel. It's set in New York, obviously, but you do get that kind of like, old ethos, Italian, family kind of reference and vibe from
Hmm.
that in that show in that movie with the use of Billy Joel's scenes from an Italian restaurant in the movie. So that's just my little plug for knowing this right there. So, but I like that movie. But go ahead, Ken. You were gonna say something.
Answering your question, Armando, I would agree.
Thank you. Thank you.
The album that I like most before this is Piano Man, and I associate Piano Man a lot with
Yeah.
um, early Elton John
Hmm.
because Piano Man has these, um,
Yeah.
you've got Traveling Prayer, The Ballad of Billy the Kid, Captain
That's
Jack,
right.
these big epic songs like Elton John, wrote before Honky Chateau.
That's right.
And I
That's
really
right.
do like You're My Home is a fantastic song.
Yeah. That's right.
Turnstiles is his focus album. This is where he focused on what was going to come afterwards. This Turnstiles is the bedrock in which he launched, um, The Stranger in 52nd Street and everything that came after it. Um,
You see, I think the reason why, not to cut you off, this has turned into an extended episode, ladies and gentlemen,
that never happened.
technically besides.
No.
Um, but to me, what kind of separates Turnstiles prior and The Stranger forward as the difference between Billy Joel as a singer-songwriter and Billy Joel the hitmaker is the way you are, just the way you are.
Sure.
Hmm.
I'm not a fan of just the way you are. I've never liked it. I never will. I'd never, even as a kid listening to it, I'm like, like I never really. So big hit though, big hit. But even as an 8-year-old listening to it, it got on my nerves. I couldn't. So that's why it kind of, I can separate the two as Turnstiles being the peak or the apex of him being known as a singer-songwriter, poet,
Yeah.
to the stranger being the hit maker for him, like starting of
Yeah.
the hits. You
But
know what I mean?
Turnstiles, like I said, it focused him on what he was going to be known best for, and that's New York City's Golden Boy. I mean,
Yeah.
okay, going back to Miami 2017, this song is epic in scope.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
Oh yeah.
it's, a satirical sci-fi vision, on the downfall of New York City, and which, like I say, here's another New York reference song. And this song became a cult favorite, especially post 9/11.
Yeah.
Uh,
Really?
yes. And
Huh.
also, I
I
like the
remember
fact that
something about that. I
I
remember
like
something
the
about that.
fact that it has a very live feel.
Yep.
For instance, at the beginning, when the vocals come in, they've got that just a slight bit of an echo on his voice, and his vocals sound like this is a live song
Like in
recorded
the
live,
studio, live in the studio
with
take. Yeah.
that little that echo, that slight delay in his voice, and and that little piano intro and
Hmm.
outro.
Yep.
It's like, okay, we're gonna settle in. We're we're going somewhere now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's just so epic in scope. In its own way, it's one of the earliest quote unquote apocalyptic rock, that I ever heard, in 76. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
but yeah, this song is incredibly powerful. So you start off the album with Say Goodbye to Hollywood and end up with Miami 2017. Man, this
Say
is one
goodbye to
of
New
those
York.
opener closers. Um,
Yeah, to
yeah,
bookend
this
the
is his
album like
first New
that.
York album.
Yeah,
Yep.
to bookend the album with Say Goodbye to Hollywood in Miami 2017, it says a lot,
Sure.
in terms of his frame of mind, in terms of what thought processes he was going through at the time. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, his growth in self-confidence,
Yeah.
I think at this point, without it, I'm not sure The Stranger would have been as big as it was. Because he managed to make songs that were, darn good, yet still commercially viable.
Hmm.
You know, uh,
Okay.
until a little bit later on, the albums as a whole weren't as big, but still, some of the tracks on those albums, the Nylon Curtain and all of that, powerful, powerful songs. And this is
Yep.
probably, as a whole, one of his most personal.
Yep.
Up to this point, yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Any more to add, Jim?
No. No.
Okay. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Attack of the Killer B-sides. Billy Joel Turnstile side 2 or side B again. Please put down in the comments below your opinion on this album. Is it a killer B-side, or have we basically missed the plot completely and we're just talking on the side of our butts? Who knows? I mean, again, we're not music experts, possibly with the exception of Ken. Uh, we're just
A lot
here
of good that
talking
does
about,
here. Yeah.
yeah, talking about music that we like. We're just talking about music that we like and that we want to bring to your
Yes.
attention. And if there are albums that we're talking about that you haven't heard in a while, maybe go back and listen to them and give us your opinion. And put down in the comments below an album in your opinion that does have a killer B side. Maybe there's an album that we missed from an artist that we haven't talked about yet. You know what? There's always something new to learn. And I've always said, once you feel or think that you know everything there is to know about music, you might as well, hang up your stuff and just go fishing and just stop. All right. So for Jim and Ken, I'm Armando signing off for now. Again, please click like and subscribe, and do hit the notification bell to keep yourselves on top of any new content we've got coming up. And we've got more shows that we're working on, and we'll bring them to you as soon as we possibly can. All right? Look after yourselves and one another, and we'll see you soon on Music Den. Bye for now.